No one stops me. I'll begin in the next couple seconds. No bird above these wild hills. Garden leaves fall one by one. Desolate autumn winds. A man alone in thin black rose. Ryukin, we must first engage in a Buddhist ethical interrogation of the resolution and embrace the path that arises from it. Muman 1228. A Buddha who lived before recorded history sat in meditation for 10 cycles of existence could not realize the highest truth. Since Buddha was meditating, why do you not fulfill Buddhahood? He was not a Buddha. What does this mean? You tell me. Muman 1228. I answered, the enlightened man is not subject to the law of causation. For this answer, evidence that clinging to absoluteness, I became a fox for 500 rebirths, and I'm still a fox. Juku said the enlightened man is one with the law of causation. At the words of Juku, the old man was enlightened, controlled or not controlled. The same dice shows two faces, controlled or not controlled. Both agree with error. Every action takes place in the karmic scale. Action within this utilitarian framework of good and evil is to be fundamentally unethical because you not create a coherent system of ethics. This is the true struggle between delusion and wisdom. Loy 8. War is held, nonetheless it continues. Obscene amounts spent on military industrial complex. It's hard to rationalize such a sum without a war. The war on terror fits the bill. The official excuse for every war is always self-defense. From a Buddhist perspective, the various conflicts of the Middle East look like a family quarrel. When something has been labeled as evil, the focus must be on fighting it. Buddhism offers a different perspective in the place of battleground of wills where good controls against evil. The most important struggle is a spiritual one between delusion and wisdom. Seeing the world primarily as a war between good and evil is one of our most dangerous delusions. Looking back over history, when leaders try to destroy evil, they've usually ended up creating more evil. Inquisitions and witch trials in medieval Europe, Hitler exterminating the Jews, Stalin, Mao, Bush, and Bin Laden. In Buddhist terms, the world much of the world's suffering has resulted in this delusive way of thinking about good and evil, keeping us from looking deeper and finding other ways to resolve differences, break that cycle by transcending those poisons in the positive groundwards, greeting the generosity, will, and the loving kindness, and delusion, the wisdom, and the construction of personhood is always insecure. That poisons our ethics by drawing lines between rights and duties. Internal Buddhist realization of interconnectedness is key to resolve that caused by this dualism. Loy 10. Since the sense of self is always a mental construct, it's by definition ungrounded. There's always insecure. The sense of self is always shadowed, haunted by a sense of lack. We try to secure ourselves just to make our situation worse. This is the core of our ignorance that Buddhism emphasizes. We have to try to secure ourselves by identifying with things inside of us. Instead of to actually ground and secure the sense of self, the tragedy from a Buddhist perspective that such attempts to solve the problem self, then end up reinforcing the actual problem in the sense that there's a me separate from others. There's never such a self. It's a sense of self that needs to be deconstructed and reconstructed. If I'm not separate from everyone else, how could my well-being be really distinguished? How could I be fully in line unless everyone else is taking care of others? Then becomes as natural as taking care of my own way. Our deepest suck is we feel disconnected. The Buddhist account of our individual predicament corresponds precisely to a collective ecological predicament today. And specifically, humans' ethics are poisoned by humanity's delusional relationship with nature. To secure ourselves in relation to the wild, we otherize animals and natures from our ethics. Civilization is based on a never-ending desire for consumption and mastery over nature and other beings. This delusion is both ecological crisis, structural racism, nuclear disaster. Instead, we should embrace compassion. Fong 11. The tech and industrial humans do not know how to distinguish necessity from discretionary desire. To satisfy wants to relieve our needs. Humans create a juggernaut of anthropogenic abuses of nature. Humans use animals in experiments and usually do not put animals in the center of their ethics. Compassion often involves sacrifice to save the world. In contrast, people like Buddha are considered killing animals and plants, exploiting animals, or like food experimentation, extracting materials from it and reshaping their surface of the human birth by cognitive dissonance and suffering we cause others, animals, and the human ability to compartmentalize all being well honed as a practice of keeping animals skin or animals rest or immense inherent insatiable desire for power dominance coupled with techniques of the most powerful animal of the planet. Civilization only created when humans dominate the earth is like transforming them into goods and services. Civilizations based on consumption, not just for satisfying basic psychological needs and social needs, but also about excessive consumption. The distinguishing mark of civilization is extravagance and insatiable appetite for consumption of goods. Why did the bloody expansion of gladiatorial conquest go on even when the Colosseum was how empty? What need was there for the Colosseum itself? It's not just how humans treat animals, plants, and earth itself. It's how we treat each other. Londoners through hosts of the themes, watching poor children money themselves, competing for coins, luxury lines, or coins, airlines, subordinates can be treated like preferring animals. We have reality, TV, NASCAR, M&A, and macabre talk shows, seeing others harm each other, die, can be dangerously, gossip viciously. Humans oversee millions of animals and construct concentration camp conditions of factory farms and more millions of animals in animal experimentation laboratories so humans can have safe makeup, shampoo, and medicine, trace energy affects humans, manipulate other life forms to create economic organisms and entertainment. Dogs, will fishing hats are a product of pure natural selection with the whims of human power trips, extending the family life. Children and women are seen as objects of domination. Humans through nature and seek to tame children are seen as microcosm of nature. On while on the side, humans are afraid of wild animals and other people in mortality. Fears seems to overtake tomophilia. Almost every day we read about monks and murdered nebulous. There's speculative anxious about future ecological crisis, racial chances, old famine, nuclear disaster, and shedding. The ego requires a realization of our unity with all living things. Only a duty of moral consideration follows for all living things. Our education and practice must center this imperative. Charlotte 9. Cosmopolitanism asserts the existence of a duty of moral consideration for all human beings. If shared humanity is presupposed, the universal duty of moral consideration follows. The duty of moral consideration requires a shared humanity. The fundamental aims of education should be based upon this imperative self-realization. By questioning the ego, this ego is successful must be transcended. One becomes self-aware. One deepens the realization that is the experience as unified with humanity and all living things. Scholars normally understand human identity in terms of personality, which is socially constructed self-concept. The self is construction. There's always intentionality itself presupposes pre-intentional awareness to be conscious of X. One has to be conscious of one's consciousness of X. There must be a implicit internal conscious level of awareness as pre-intentional intentional and non-positional. When the ego should have prediscursive non-positional self-awareness is revealed, the prediscursive self-awareness is unified and independent with all living things. Prediscursive self-awareness exists in the field of awareness and interconnected with all sentient being the same. No experience is only no experientially from the perspective of ontological truth, non-violence, false, all unity, interdependence, humanity, life damages all forms, life, non-duality, essential unity, one becomes, or the interdependence of nature being the harm of others, the harm oneself, non-violence, rest, and the awareness of our fundamental interconnection. And the interconnectedness of the world can be changed by changing its reflection in ourselves. There's no true meaning from debating policies that will never happen. Solutions will not come from more research or critical thinking. Only focusing on our inner dimensions allow us to convert Gion in the Vignon, i.e., information in the meaning or knowledge and understanding. This is John 6. The interconnectedness of the world is that to ourselves we find ourselves among components of our own psyche, then we'll possess the inner resources to make peace in multicultural society. Every day more information, new research, political change, the current business, education, largely comprised by acquiring and organizing such information. Students are taught the skills needed to assimilate and translate information, but such simple alpha function in one dimension, helping more is to convert information to meaningful knowledge. The way we make sense of the world is also conditioned for relevant societal forces, among them education. The solution, economic amendment, and many other problems will ultimately not be problem. The more information about the level where information merits, but the higher to become meaning education would reach beyond information, must switch deeper, must reach from the very consumer of consciousness, where all practice the critical reasoning, writing, as well as for scientific and quantitative analysis of the world, beset with complex internal as well as external, greater importance to balance in shaping our intellects, the systemic cultivation of our hearts, our nerves, accomplishment, achievement, contemplative education, translates in our capacities for peace building, and thus it's a Buddhist imperative that the United States should invest in ethical, legal, dharma, and nature. Point 15. Fundamental duties are as important as fundamental right. Human duties are always included the basis of all sorts of human rights violations. Ever this happens only because we perceive rights and duties as differently, ethically, legally, ontologically, metaphysically. Both are two sides of the same reality. Dharma shows all different aspects of it. So not divide respecting one meaning of dharma. Duty rights can be expressed doing one's duty. Dharma is the law according to one station life. The universe is pervaded by consciousness of the cosmic principles transcending, backing all living and non-living. Dharma unifies all physical, mental, and cosmic phenomena. Everything and all beings are bound together. The cosmic principle, which is inexhaustible. Despite having such beautiful ethical legal causes, we are unable to perform our legal system. The present legal system disconnected, disintegrated, dissected, ancient legal concepts are harmonized, integrated, correlated. There are many manifolds as well as forms of life, logic of opportunities to individuals for development, possibilities for self-realization. Dharma is the law for all self-realization, imposes duty for rights and duties are rights only through core layers of duties and non-attachment. Is key to a pragmatism of practice that allows for new solutions to structural Dr. Lowy 8. Improvements means that no problems intractable since it's part of a large process that constantly evolving a cold will never end until suddenly due to apartheid and self-efficacy seem implaceable but collapse solution are permanent but use the lack of defense when any fixed ideology implies that pragmatism of practice non-attached allows for management solutions and leave us at the rights that reminds usually circle and Buddhism applies how to engage rather than what to engage with whatever reach out of just we realize it's only one aspect of a larger set of issues. All relationships can be discouraging so far as they reinforce each other. Some that are more important, which encourages us to look at the heart of the problem. Everyone knows the direction we need to move, and the question is whether there's political and economic will to do so. The solution that involves liberating one's awareness from the place it gets stuck. Buddhism made a distinctive role emphasizing where collective awareness has become tried, showing how to liberate our awareness. Liberalization calls for personal spiritual practice and vote after vote the candle, even if the non-normative seems dark. Attachment, insularity, worldly knowledge never hold a candle to true enlightenment. Move on, 1228. Tokens and bad and open the screen to go, observing the darker side to reunion often tokens in the light candle to find wages as tokens and receive reunion blue without however obscure teaching ours in comparison with enlightenment. They're like a single heritage great, so however profound the complete knowledge of the world compared to enlightenment. They're like one drop of water to the great ocean. The best mind cannot be held, the present mind cannot be held, the future mind cannot be held. You wish for something refreshments, which you mind you use for them. And Buddhism need not be science, but is better than it. It accounts for the sixth sense of the mind, solving climate, war, and unsustainable growth. Chang 7. There's an apparent difference between science and Buddhism with respect to the relationship they assume between objects and subjects. The objects under study are always assumed to be independently. Scientists started to realize the objects of their study may not exist physically through the wave particle duality. The uncertain principle also established depends on observation of the observer. Buddhists learn much more attention on psychic, karmic law, and general laws of cause and effect. Buddhists include direct experiences from the sixth sense of the mind as verifiable truth practitioners who are practicing removing their own conviction in immense amount of sense that they are deprived. Scientists may attempt to find out what people are thinking by using a machine or analyzing the chemicals created by the great brain. These have a factual basis, but what they reveal and reflect is not a reality but a shadow reality. The truth from scientific inquiries distorted with the instruments they use because of the need for specialization. Science also takes a reductionist approach to the solution. It provides is always a piecemeal form, integrating the piecemeal knowledge and the holistic wisdom to reduce human suffering receives the very low priority and cyber the division between man and man knowing limit through severe limitation. It's lead the Dao science is always partial truth is acted upon it might cause the functional consequences the humans and the environment. Mark the current environment. Let me get a drink of water.
Did you put me on the chain map by any chance? Or no?
Ah, shoot, did I forget? Oops. There you go. Put you on the chain again.
Okay.
Oh, so cocky. I'm ready for cross when you're all
All right, just give me a second. I'm plugging in my laptop.
Okay.
Sorry, everybody. This debate started at 6 a.m. our time, so we're kind of struggling, but we're trying. We're here.
It's rough.
Shout out to the West Coast. I'm sorry
Okay.
you're early. I'm sorry it's early as shit there.
It's okay. It's worth it. Weather's nice. Okay. Anyone not good for cross-X? Right. Oh, it's the 1AC. Okay. Does the 1AC defend disads to the government providing rights or duties in one of the
What
top?
does it mean to defend a disad?
Will the 1ACs say that you do not link to disads to government action because you do not use the government?
Like, what do you mean by government action?
Action by the United States federal government passing a policy.
Depends on the disad.
Okay, so the 1AC does endorse action by the United States federal government towards legal personhood.
The one I see endorses ethical legal dharma.
Is the effect of that a fiated policy action?
We think that ethical legal dharma, as described by our boy evidence, uses dharma as an ethical orientation to rights. and
Okay,
duties.
is the effect of that ethical orientation a fiated policy action?
We fiat the dharma, not the endpoint of dharma's application to law.
Okay, you fiat who does the Dharma?
The United States.
Everybody in the United States or institutions in the United States?
I mean, we think the state's counterplan is not competitive, but like.
Not my
United
question.
States.
Does every individual person in the United States?
I'm not going to specify an actor. The United States is the resolution will specify as far as the resolution.
Okay, cool. Why is, I guess, what is the value of talking about Buddhism in debate?
We isolate multiple values. So the Jonk evidence does a really great job of kind of talking about how we learn and kind of we need to tie education to deeper meaning, kind of relating it to wisdom, how we approach.
Why is that good?
We approach desire.
Why is
Enlightenment.
that good in debate?
We isolate specifically how the goal of debate should be moving towards enlightenment, because otherwise we're going to stuck in desire.
Why debate? Why can't we just do that like at school or in our homes? Why is debate good?
Kind of a collection of ethical subjectivities. We think if
Why?
you are ethical subjectivity, that's a good idea.
Why is ethical subjectivity important in debate? What's the point of that?
Obviously, every debate, how do you determine who wins and who loses? How do you determine whether the AFF is a good idea? It's determined by a question of ethics, whether it's a policy AFF reading util-based ethics or our AFF reading Buddhist.
Well, maybe, but why is debate about ethics valuable? That's not an answer to the question.
It helps the judge resolute and solve the debate. Kind of.
Okay, so
right
the only reason debating about Buddhism is good is because it helps the judge decide who won the debate about.
No, we isolate also, and there's the Jonk evidence. You let me explain those. The Jonk evidence is super good about how if we tie education to deeper meaning, talk about kind
Why
of.
does that education need to happen in debate, in college policy debate?
We believe debate's a site of education. We're not going to make any like.
So just anywhere with any
spillover arguments. We think in the round, it's valuable to talk about Buddhism.
Why? What does that produce?
We say how it ties education we learn in the round, the deeper meaning. Tying it to deeper meaning is a good idea. That's key to approach and orient ourselves towards enlightenment. Secondly, we don't have to win any.
I have more questions, so I'm just going to start running prep.
Sure.
The Moonon evidence says causality is bad and antithetical to enlightenment. You just made a bunch of causal claims about debate's educational value. Can you square these?
That's not what the card says.
That's not what the card says. The koan is really good as it kind of talks about how we try
The
to
enlightenment
interpret meaning and kind of we approach meaning through different ways, through contemplative education, through reflection.
You said the purpose of debate should be enlightenment. Your card says, quote, the enlightened man is not subject to the law of causation.
Yeah, like the idea that a certain meaning imposes certain understanding. Understanding
The
is
idea
the
that, so
spectrum,
your answer to
obviously.
the question about how the 1AC isn't causation is the idea that a certain meaning imposes.
No, okay, so
certain
this
sense of-
entire line of questioning is obsolete and incoherent. It's understanding is like a inverse onion. There's layers, but they all get to a central truth, right? So you peel back a layer that makes you understand something more. The causal determination and implication from that, does that mean that the like, because you're going to say like debate creates like better subjects or clash means we learn more. We've critiqued that overall frame and said that wisdom enables you to realize the center of the onion.
Sorry, taking another second. All right.
I'm resending. I want to see. Okay, new version is sent. It's too often in case. Oh. Just give me a thumbs up, verbal confirmation when everyone's good to go.
I need another sec.
No worries.
Thanks, all good.
All right, I'll start in like 5 seconds unless someone stops. First, topic interpretations. That's mostly topical. Resolve means enacted policy by law. Words, phrases. This is where resolve is the way legislative subject law. The United States federal government is national government in DC. Black laws for federal government, national government, state controls over smaller units. Best make the force of law. Dwyer 16. Best be legally vested definition. Establish the focus of vested rights is enforceable. Rights and duties are referred to legal guarantees or commands. Solomon 17. Rights and duties to the condition of the state to question law. And to responsibility commanded by law, which are directed by the way. It gives all the recognized rights and duties to recognize and subject to rights and duties. That's gated predictability. Only are intergrounds in relevant legal literature to give debaters a basis to prepare for negatives and affirmatives guaranteed to clash. There are few impacts versus competitive equity. The unpredictable preparation as a stable stasis point. There's an upside bias that destroys the competitive nature of the activity and participation. Equity is obviously an impact because debate is a game that's key to the AFF, if not just vote nay. Second is information reflexivity. The rest is a debate around a predictable governmental plan creates the conditions for informed learning and well-rounded information gathering allowing a holistic research approach. The impact is information reflexivity. The issues of actual evidence are difficult to resolve and require information informed processes and information vetting to counter problematic premises that result in material violence like Iraq war. Only a model debate that encourages second and third level testing encourages unintended consequences, pros, conditional or dynamic argumentation that will foster well-informed decisions and self-efficacy. That's leak 16. Positive information literacy, dynamic critical arguments is rather widely hard and complicated with original materials in nature of demonstration teaching arguments to go inside and motivate to do the limited information she makes with credibility the different research project the research analysis go with the personality and finding information gathering and students recognizing and knowledge of contexts information learning critical spatial information critical and basic element of political engagement customer relation engagement debate about policy political learning process after they left the classroom and while changing values also discussing critical so the more difficult result of information whereas information gathering and reasoning questions editing multi action around which classing self and involving factual evidence and is more positive and valuable to students and has the motivation knowledge choices but again the outside of financial institutions also efficacy usage reasoning underline the claims of the fact but the evidence being identified the government education typically gain better understanding of what institutional activity and word may change even when we increase the technological knowledge but relative to significant increase to citizenship efficacy because training of which students just a time argument rather than partisan policy opposition could just engage policy without a hostility with the hostile fair getting people to avoid policies but in the debate change to knowledge studies students maintain doubt and later from learning literacies beyond the classroom intellectual dynamic nature of political arguments where really misconception there's a single right answer of politics. You should also believe that it makes predictable testability model comparison debate inherently judges relative truth rather valued by whether or not it gets the answer combination of less predictable case saying the burden of rejoinder to them starting a speech ahead will always inflate the value of their impacts which makes not arbitrarily weighing whether they should have read the one to see in the first place if possible within the structure of debate round. So even if we lose very word and vote negative presumption they also include a greater more hazard that leads to absolutely about individual self-care. So even if you think this app is answerable I mean ones that they incentivize are so assume the worst possible affirmative about weighing our impacts. This time. Master for Animals Institute of Medical Research and Innovation, Dash 21. Is it a litigation on the research university laboratories, hospital, research, medical progress, medical maternity, medical animals, medical investigate the significant litigation on the research, of the next medical research, medical animal research, medical university, and over the majority of medical innovation, and cancer medical surgical procedure, using animal research, innovation solves disease, volunteer, and ABR measure, and facial 20. As key actors in the innovation of pharmaceutical companies and product development is vaccine and answer preventing public health challenges, management, well, seeking and having the each there's about there was a project there in the pharmaceutical innovation president and was manufacturer and medical authority to support partner, suitable innovation resulting in infectious disease threats, industry is given the contributing effective medicine, vaccine, and diagnostics, etc. And effective infection is the bottom president and pharmaceutical innovation, pharmaceutical industry from the previous health emergency to with infectious disease and recent times. Disease causing extinction, the risk is categorically underestimated. Pamela Armstrong 15. Does it know what are the greatest cause of mortality and how their majority will Japanese largest great part of the future takes in nature andable to fail? And it's only finishing if it's all combined into little extreme in the future, but it is definitely not one. And better medical research, matter transport, and sensing population, invention speed, rapidly to political and actors, version economic isolation, damage trade, environmental is humanity is every function impossible, human skill, the basic climate change with every pandemics. If perhaps finally we are overreaction to completing nuclear and bio and chemical wars, Suzuki step 21. But if this is what predators need to do, weapons cause more winter, when it comes to starvation of human species, and if it's what it is, the reaction to civilize the weapons to urban and the weapons that was governed about, and the reason is trouble dependent on the residents, the opportunity for target discovery, the point is the trade budget, whether it be natural, so when it gets into nuclear war. Extension out wisdom debating about it is good. Can 18. You would go to problem with okay, resident, have to put a visit a feature with only we do, you're going to visit it, it's a truly is specialization, the church of our visit of many nuclear visit of CC, essentially they will, and now we never send our speech and never system on TV service available. This would usually somebody having a word, when having a best number teacher, enemy ourselves and we can have navigate safety. We do not need to build it over the validity. We can do the really got the possibility for destruction every survival like from easy and the ability to combat everything was fighting as a common cause of survival. Case. Voting a perception of the planet is permitted to overcome the burden of proof. That means that their worldview must explain their harms because of that worldview inherent barrier prevents solvency of those harms, and their advocacy must create unique change that sufficiently overcomes that barrier. Beheading mindset shift into voter allows you infinite utopia beyond double turns all their office makes it impossible to be neg because everyone's mind changes. Warming isn't existential. That's IBD 17 up 18. News of the general the comedy amount of CO2 by 45% actual temperature rate comparatively from models one edition 5% decreases CO2 1 million model which increase warm essentially whatever by IPCC and what will not lead to cause the work eliminating the little bear and a journal is published journal published the same number of US because of warming and we know the city general nature of the CO2 would be so 45 degrees Celsius and around getting my issues of use of CO2 symbolically disrupting North is conservative feeds a cycle of reputation compulsion that reinvested the exact system and attempts to deconstruct and privatizes resistance bond 8 sub 14. Behind the facade negotiating negation tends to move circular fashion as negating itself into arguing information of institution of skills without the realization vessels and somebody had to total reason was a very somebody also since into my society is again and institution of institution of piece of rather than reactionary negation because ways that over the institution because it would not out of the central capital somebody gets institution the other person emergence of what I want to say and every political test of institution would be neutral the body miracles remains the order of the permanent in the legal constitution. There's a self one bodies are discrete organizations of cells even if ones are energy organic or twined individual bodies exist separately. Physicalism is true. Lewis 19. And then some flat earth is many we have a very sorry try and just to different evidence of personal testimony and science and global the managed freedom with the brain everyone evidence consensus ideas are incompatible science believers are the scientists that are writing on society have to be fit both the languages and amount of these all to women and fundamentally conservatives and amount of silence to be complete misery and or even dualism we can naturally totally what they do with the numbers of popular this is perfect paradise and life and killing idea of racial religion and whether life could live define every religion in human history and suffering happiness other people realize that they have love and environment what exists matters we have others that are LSE and starting with the president was interventions having attention and no filter to make so was a consumer and just not eventually become a center but about including records and lessons here some operation about different analysis actual intervention even more of it wish the center force made essential the showing the right lenses and a conversation with the budget down intervention for what simply needed no consenting with the resumption and intervention relative to the future making it to hard making a local power and living someone to believe in master as spirit too even if their theories are right around allegedly predisposed to reject physicalism because it's counterintuitive but that doesn't mean that's not scientifically grounded. There's no evidence of anything about physicality so you should use precautionary principle. 3. Everyone thinks that there is a self because pain is experienced individually, so it doesn't matter if their theory is true. They're starting to refer to become a result of this working on the self is no positive potential towards well. We can remove links to examples of whether he and better the was the concepts of becoming rounded over and over. And by means that right then I think the politics of having nobody with any time. And it's political side of being undertaken whether it's something that was and political office somebody working on so instead of the word of information that have that colleagues are short and able to pay the was this because just content ideals regarding and metaphysical system for race you know that the cosmos is shifting shifting suddenly later reason to where the responsibility of the information to its opposite the less really after so many transformation until the somebody gets a personality doesn't like rational models aren't the will to mastery will of rejection is a right wing shutdown strategy routine 17 ultimately rejecting hypercritical without rational capacity or the argument of the media and that the only good is right to get out the reason we're not trying to master something I know what rejection to master as we go to treat nothing fully rational everything different to the category rejected and reason to try to revision it doesn't mean the reason to use it but it's not the ability to let them come out of goodies and so basically reasoning is reasoning focus on the possibility of alternative forms. Theology is politically ineffective. A robust legacy of embracing the ideological flexibility, religious dogma-based mobilizing large-scale political responses to violence impossible. Anderson 95. The ability to logic to good legitimacy and intellectual leadership would have caused and judgment was likely by what logic and conversation is effective help the less incredible unifying ideology what the liberal theology is arbitrary and reason to maintain its identity and activity interest liberating social problems and belief in American theology have been more effective. This market appears the generals that justify themselves to devices like the which individuals totality black suffering is survival and is a very literally form of rise of blackness only substantive practice of black theology and individual theologies can be despite collective politics. MC 11. Question that was theology allowed to dominate individual and say recognition policy to research the psychological theories of behavior and mechanism short of the pre-social and so and whether it is literary personal technology to the self-sufficiency of reference and the question of validity is started as those instructions but it's evidence of what was the individual with the C2 policy composition nature and the level of massive problem and analytical composition that is subject to the rest of little more than faith.
Awesome. Let me know when you're good for cross. Let's start first on this question of fiating mindset shifts. Kind of basically any AFF and policy debate would never be passed under the current political climate. What's the bright line and model for debate where you can't fiat any form of mindset shift?
That is very different from AFFs that defend a plan. You're fiating a mindset shift in how people view theology and view the advocacy. What a policy AFF would do was fiat the hypothetical implementation of a policy, not changing people's minds about it.
Yeah, no policy act, even if politicians would disagree with the act, induces a mindset shift. It just assumes that they would do the act, even though maybe in the real world they might disagree with it.
And regardless, if we don't fiat that mindset shift, you're just fiating the policy. It preserves generic decide ground policy.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. I want to go into this question of theology and its politically ineffectiveness. The Anderson 95 card. This card's in the context of specifically how Black spirituality could not grapple with anti-Blackness. How does that apply to Buddhism and total reflection?
Yeah, and the
or dharmic law.
In the number one, it applies to theology broadly. It gives the example of African American theology.
No, where does it apply to theology broadly?
Okay.
The Anderson evidence makes a structural claim about the impalatability of theology for mobilizing mass politics. Makes that claim by using the example of Black liberation theology because that's the one with the most literature about it, and Anderson is writing about the history of social movements. But it makes a claim about why the vacuity of individual theologies is such that it's nearly impossible to rationally distinguish the implications of claims like there isn't a self. And that the effect of that is that political mobilization becomes very hard because any of these principles could be used to justify their opposite. There not being a self could be a reason why we should impose infinite pain on one person because they experience pain differently than me, or it could be a reason we should impose infinite pleasure because all pleasure is shared. The fact that you need a PhD in order to distinguish which one of those interpretations is correct is proof that the 1AC politics can't be a basis for any broader mobilization.
That makes sense. Yeah, I'm going to go on to this question of physicalism. What's the scientific backing for this card, Lewis 718? How does it grapple with the question of quantum physics, how we experience energy after death, or that?
Okay, number one, I don't think any of that beyond anything else matters. The Lewis card says the brain is just a brain. We are composed of a brain and a bunch of cells. That proves physicalism, even if there isn't a soul. We're just bodies composed of these molecules.
Quantum physics fits into that, I think, pretty cleanly because it says, Lewis would say that the flows of energy you have described as existing universally operate through a series of discrete physical cells, which then manifest in action.
That makes sense. Thank you. Are you sure we running prep? Okay, 10 minutes starting now. Where did you all mark on case?
Sorry,
Did you mark on case anywhere?
I don't think so. No.
Awesome, thank you. Uh, 7:15, C-Sprout.
Yeah, I'm sending it out. It's case T animal research testing good. Just for like organizational purposes, some of the case debate about like science is going to primarily be on the science like this stuff, but I'll line by line the cards and have like some framing arguments on the case there. The majority of that debate will be done on the dissad. Like the dissad will first be like thing like about consequences, then answering the substance of the dissad, then some science stuff. And the science stuff will answer majority of the case there. Huh? Sorry, you were quiet. I didn't hear you.
Sorry, I just said we'll let you know when we have the doc.
Yeah, it's been said. No, you guys are good. Where's my phone? I'm about to yell about it. So, you know. Okay. Did everyone get the doc? Yep. Yes. Okay. Will, I'm not sure if you're here. Good.
Yeah. My background makes me disappear, but I'm not going anywhere, so I'm here. You're good.
Okay. Everyone else good. Christiana, Madison. Yes. Okay. Matt, can you mute on Discord? I can hear you typing.
Yeah.
Okay. Or actually, I'll definitely. Okay. Oh, I guess there's an overview on the case. Relevant. Not that. It's kind of bad, but not that bad. Okay. I'm just going to start in like 10 seconds. Vote off to best in ethical, legal, dharma, and nature. Everything in debate must be filtered through ontology, the cosmic principle of interconnectedness. The question of rights and duties must be subject to what our relationship to the world is. Two impacts. One, dukkha, dualist individualism driven by attachment makes suffering and disharmony inevitable. Only disenchantment from attachments via interdependence and shedding the ego solves. Additionally, when I see Loy was conceded, it's a psychoanalysis critique which says that construction of the self and formulation of person is unstable, which creates unification. That means you should vote affirmative. Second, delusion. Treat delusion as synonymous with violence. A point is war. When I see Loy says that dualisms and otherization create the justifications for otherization and human intervention like Hitler, Stalin, Mao, and intervention like Rwanda and Yugoslavia. B, environment. When I see Funk's relation to civilization is based on consumption and antagonism, which causes resource conflicts and ecological crisis and warming. The AFF laws on two levels. One, ethical orientation. Loy and Funk says that ignoring interconnectedness is the delusion that enables this violence. The AFF views the self and nature as one, which means that the ethical orientation means the process of war and harm is impossible. Second, dharma as law. Legal dharma solves ontology because when I see Boy says that the legal dharma would unify cosmic principles with law, which enables self-realization, which is free from legal barriers. Specifically, that answers any argument they make about the law being able to circumvent it, because dharma would influence law on a context-based basis. The problem with personhood now is that rights are sweeping, but the AF would be contextual and holistic. Every AF is a mindset shift. There's a mindset shift of Republican voting AFs to give rights to nature. Obviously, that's as drastic as the plan, because obviously they would be completely opposed to stuff like the environment and pro-business. The ballot stuff, the role of the judges to move towards alignment, will blow out the candle. Alignment outweighs everything. Extend when it's junk. Mostly will be implicated on topicality, but integrated education is inevitable, which is a conceded uniqueness claim. We need to marry that education to meaning they consider the koan, which says that our offense outweighs warming. It's super bad, which means that extinction is irrelevant. The consequences frame will obviate this, but I'll read evidence that does says that it is existential greed. In 21, the conversations affecting it will worsen the water direction process of the story, but it's probably country experience shortages will risk state failure, increasing tension to state tension, distract them from working on important to watch that post challenges that the world at large and full policy should reduce risks around the world. Conflict resolution and management hold the promise for management to address the problems. Federal action should include the judicial actions. It's great, but needs your opportunities. Now, the first piece of physical evidence is bad. Does not assume Newtonian physics and conservation of energy. Proves that energy caps after death, even if the evidence is somewhat implicated later to the doesn't. It's not damning to our ontological claim because of empiric. Second, the physicality stuff that there's examples decomposed as part of particle physics was about the self argument. Pain is not experienced individually. It ignores collective generational trauma, which finds in its people the thorn evidence. Its internal reflection is good and key to shedding the ego, which was done above, and it's a question of ethical orientation, which resolves this piece of evidence. Reading evidence based on queer theory, not history, or not our evidence of history and scientific understanding of why splitting the environment is bad is controlled by our Fung evidence. The Anderson evidence, not based in Buddhism, which was explaining cross-sex the self and superior, so that tying it to understanding means you replicate delusion. The collectivity argument is Russian delusion comes first. Hasty action results in fascism, environmental delusion, spiritual suffering outweighs. That's Goiteman, and this evidence also says that there's a life after death. That's Goiteman 19. The life after death, according to quantum physics, a parallel universe is apart from this world where ends this signifies nothing. The distinction between past, present, and future is solution. Life is not made of matter but of vibrations. According to Max Planck, regarded by a derivative from consciousness, the core consciousness creates the universe, and reality is determined by the observable life of moral quantum physics. So life after death and the interchange of mortal, we believe in death because we've been taught we are dying. Framing stuff about science will be on the dissent. T. We are the resolution because there's no objective resolution. Otherwise, debate would not be standards, but what the actual meaning would be. Any negative interpretation is delusion, and voting neg means that you submit yourself to 500 rebirths. Let's move on to whole 28. The answer himself, the 11 is not subject to left condition. The answers have a distinct clean out who speaks of Fox to meet him for 500 rebirths. A civil Fox records that the enlightenment is with a left condition. They were conditions that the man was enlightened, controlled, or not controlled. The same that shows basis not controlled, or whether group is error. We meet A. The plan has the U.S. best ethical legal dharma. The plan text in the vacuum is the only metric for evaluating topicality. Advantages do not have to be topical. Anything else makes it burdens. B. The point is the one I see. Boy evidence is the evidence you read after the round to make the decision on the violation. Boy is the only evidence that has an intent to define, and it's the only card that says that is in the context of dharma and rights and duties. It says that the cosmic principle of interconnectedness implicates the topic because rights and duties are inseparable. The AFF best ethical legal dharma as law, which imposes both duties and rights. The counter interpretation resolve means to become about right has right to resolve that interstitial McCullough means will help otherwise. And then it indicates the use of the colonists independent. They said U.S. We already said the plan takes in vacuum. We said the U.S. would do the plan. We'll consider this the government showed us an ethical obligation should 22 use indicate obligation duty or correctness should means ought expressed to you no provided dictionary to no date. No, you say get duty propriety or expediency. That means ethics or topical vest. It's not absolute human. 22 the word vest is conveyed. Great, not you should express from it to partial. Now prefer ethical positioning decides starting from concepts and justifying them post facto causes serial policy failure implicated on the case because of the law evidence. Post facto ethics is what caused the war on terror and human interventions. Their model debate cements post facto justifications where debaters use whatever ethics to use convenient to suit their convenient to suit them. That makes us worse people because we just do whatever we feel like and then are good at advocating why ethics would be good post facto instead of interrogating why about becoming more ethical in the first place. Attachment decide it turns competitive equity to negative attachment continuity. It's a game which means you're due to suffer because of identification with wins and losses, which interventions do good. There's no separation between the game and outside because everything is interconnected, which means that to be this game must be focused on ontology. Beyond decide mostly implicated above. Wisdom turns caution. Education, which is the one I see Janka evidence. Insular education without meaning is non unique and has no value. The only benefit from the activities and internal transformation, which turns the inevitable to into warrants about why clash can solve our offense. Our interpretation solves limits and ground. Ethics are predictable. First on limits, ethics are predictable. And do duties check limits, explosion, functional limits check because of core rights ground, like explore for rights critiques be. The neck has more ground to get critiques of our system of ethics and utilitarian in addition to core topic ground, extra topicality. One, the AFF gets offense against neck position. Obviously, impact turns don't have to be topical. D, having a dissad doesn't influence the plan. Our ethics are just a preempt. No, to util, which impact turns that dissad on the level of assumptions. B, second is interconnectedness is inevitable. Every plan is intimately linked to its moral assumptions and justifications behind it. Normal ask fiat through agential questions. Utopian fiat argument on the case proved the AFF is the same as reading scenario planning cards, but about Buddhism instead. That our AFF has a plan which solves the endpoint of this offense and functional limits above. Reasonability, competing interpretations is dualist. Offense, defense frames or anti-ethical. Don't try to maximize limits because that crowds out any hope and enlightenment. Topicality is used to crowd out the clash of ethics. We said is good. Ontology overdetermines clash and fairness, which is above. They have no way to teach about. You should take the about away from them. The disadvantage, we don't disadvantage consequences at the top. We don't need to win util. Our cosmic ontological frame overdetermines these questions. One, ethical dualism. The neck has a myopic focus on good and evil. Death and pain are better explained through dukkha. They arise because of delusion. The extension of that is made broad determinations about good and evil, which links to our 1AC low evidence that separation and otherization, which causes the war on terror, etc. Explained above. Second, maximization. Greed is one of the three evils. Attempting to maximize utility enables the endless sacrifice, which culminated in the human intervention, etc. Above, we should be satisfiers, not maximizers. About ethics. Third, attentive mastery. Consequentialism makes deciding and making moral judgments impossible, which is the one I see low evidence that says we should not endlessly evaluate end goals because that can't prescribe action because it's infinitely regressive. Animal suffering is bad. Infects intensify. The rest raw and 18-minute production is quintupled. When it's said that life is going to be able to hit the water panel, so not at all the last 50 years of catastrophe. The solution is not simply switching from free range to option is also less efficient, so it cannot satisfy certain demands. So local farmers can profit the maximizing yields that animal welfare protect and no one's enables slaw slaughter. Discovered the law of farmers who deny their slowly combining the trends with maximizing margins. Perfect sustainable storm of misery comparatively outweighs. Actually, I don't need to read that piece of evidence. Now the humans more important stuff. This is the delusion that prevents the research from being used. This distribution problems mean that tech research on animals never gets actually distributed because of medical greed. It's the fundamental antagonism, which is the logic that prevented aid distribution. They haven't answered the second is that they haven't answered the Fung evidence, which says that control is a logocentrism and anthropocentrism, which causes the problems that they try to solve. Species neutral valuations are most ethical. Harris 99 says put a defended moral theory said founded in arbitration is fully unjustified preference for one creature over another, self-interest should away from the beneficiary. Historical claims about black sciences virtues matter for women's superiority defined by species has always been disreputable. To consider whether weird persons on other places we have best species matter for the significant understanding what person you must consider what the person says for thinking beings. We must offer superior technology that asks the question of whether for all fellow creatures and moral standing is a species neutral description. The science stuff, our ontology claim of cosmic interdependence was impacted out above. Extend the Chang evidence. Science is an incorrection relation to the world. Objects are interconnected and steady. Buddhism accounts for the sixth sense of the mind, which science can't solve. Scientific conclusions are reductionist and piecemeal. Falsifiability is backwards because internally incoherent. Scientific optimism is entrenched in violence because of man can conquer nature, which is the Fung evidence. Acting on this means that scientific basis links to relational evil offense. Modern science proves four notable truths right in the 17th truths. Buddhist ideology says cooperation for science and psychology is corroboration corporation solves science offers. There's no theory has proven to be true. The sense of mathematical theorems to be true. Evidence's assessment of why people suffer warrants confidence that human beings fail to see the world clearly. This make out of the stuff such as natural selection makes things better, means that they're always unsatisfied. Therefore, no which makes sense against clinging to the blessed, but also escaping unpleasant thirst and death. Although it's been transformed by meditative access, self does not exist. Corroborated by modern psychology, just shown itself to be less destructive behavior, reduced identification with self, but also less prioritization of my interests over others. Smooth proportion goes to most of this situation, psychological dynamics that makes it suffer within. It makes it behave godly. Buddhist prescription for ending suffering will make us better people.
Sorry, where'd you cut the car?
I finished that.
What?
I finished that last piece of it.
Oh, okay. Good for cross.
Yes.
Let's start on case. You said Dharma can be like the new form of like legal system or like legal focus we use. How does Dharma change like current laws and government structure?
The Boy evidence says that Dharma as law starts from unifying all cosmic phenomena. So the problem with law now is that it's divorced from ethics. Dharma as law forefronts ethics and then uses that to inform law. Our evidence says that that's the only thing that can enable self-realization.
Okay. The Glake evidence, you've said it says threat multipliers are what cause extinction, like due to initial climate change. What are these threat multipliers? How does that ultimately like culminate?
Well, you missed the argument at the beginning of this, which is that extinction focus is irrelevant. But
I mean, you read a
evidence
comment
cites
about
the
it. I'm just trying to
QDR, which is
understand, like, I'm trying to understand the internal link
So
chain.
yeah, so the evidence says the QDR, which is the Quadrennial Defense Review, which says that water resource threat issues and like a statement of like the U.S. national intelligence, which says that shared water resources are like being like hoarded and stuff. That's one thing. So water resources. The second thing says that, huh?
Okay, never mind.
So, okay. The
That's
second
fine.
thing was
Okay.
economy. The third thing is food supply.
Okay.
And all of these things are based on like resource consumption, which they also.
The Gwedem evidence, spiritual suffering. What is that? Like, how do we feel that life after death it describes? What does it look like?
So our 1 and C pieces of evidence in this Goitem evidence are in the context of karma, and karma is not just like the colloquial sense of karma, which is like I do good, which means that good stuff's going to happen to me, or if I do bad, bad stuff's going to happen to me. But karma itself, at least in Buddhist theology, is more than just like stuff comes around, but everything is interconnected. Your actions are interconnected.
Well, sure, but like, what is that? How do you physically or like
Yeah, so it's the
emotionally
same.
feel
So
that
it's
after
the same
death?
as suffering. Spiritual suffering is existential and lasts along your body, because physical suffering is pain, and
How do you feel
your
it if
mind
you
is.
don't have a body?
So this is the problem, that you're identifying the body with physical pain, but physical violence causes mental suffering because we've identified with the body, right? We've said that spiritual suffering is net bad. You've said bodily suffering bad. We said bodily suffering causes spiritual violence,
Okay, well, okay,
and spiritual violence outlasts the body.
that's
So it
fine.
outweighs on
The-
scope. Does that make
The
sense?
attachment dissad on framework, why does this not, you have chosen debate of all like educational spaces?
Yeah, so that was on the impact stuff.
Why
So
doesn't it
enlightenment
make sense?
outweighs. Debate is obviously insular education, but there's no separation between debate. If you make a ballot turn double argument, we have a koan specifically for that. So there's like this story, which is like Zuigon tipping over a vase, because defining yourself in opposition to things or like seeking up attachments and gathering ballots is not what it means to seek for enlightenment. That means you can vote AF without being attached to the ballot, because the notion of being over-invested in the game is the problem. So like the attachment dissad says that exclusively seeing debate as a game and ignoring that it's interconnected to all of these other things is the attachment we critique. The AF is something that includes debate from everything else, which is our whole thesis about why wisdom is important, because the education we learn in round can be accessed elsewhere.
Okay, we have 8:27. Sorry. Okay.
Remind me
Is there a counter interpretation? Slash, what is the text of it?
We do not have a counter interpretation for like debate that was not based in the resolution. Everything else was like interpretations of what the resolution means.
All right, I stopped at 4 minutes exactly. There's not a doc. I'm gonna run to the bathroom before I start though. God, the sun still isn't out. Just tea. Sorry, just tea. You have water. Coffee it is. All right, is anyone not ready?
Give me 1 second. I'm just pulling up the flow. Okay, I'm good.
And I'm gonna adjust my windows. Okay. Vote negative for a model debate that encourages predictable, well-researched contestation and argument development. Some constraints are inevitable, come from debaters and give argumentative incentives. So it's a question of maximizing the utility of those constraints, which non-uniques, all their offense, the default to competing interpretations. You're weighing a model of debate that incentivizes racing to the fringes because it has no predictable, definitional, or non-arbitrary limits against our criticism of their engagement of predictability in debate. The disputes over factual evidence are difficult to resolve. They range from political misinformation like Iraq's invasion to local issues like whether or not to vaccinate your children, which require quality, defensible information filtration and evaluation, which is especially unique because information validity is at risk now in domains on critical subjects like climate change and abortion. So it's try or die for reflexive thinkers. The 1AC makes the claim that, quote, from a Buddhist perspective, the various conflicts in the Middle East look like a family quarrel. That's because they're all three Abrahamic faiths. That's incredibly ahistorical and wrong. It doesn't explain why Sunni states fight Sunni states and assumes like a neocon Sunni versus Shia view of the Middle East. But studying context and history is necessary to understand why that is such a silly claim to make in a debate round. Two internal links, but we only need one to win. First is predictable limit. Only our model can teach holistic, well-rounded information gathering. The nature of predictability forces second and third level argument testing and preparation through multiple knowledge bases like news articles and court reports because teams have to fully vet the other team's arguments and prepare every possible mechanism. Their model encourages teams to race to the fringes, which makes debaters only prepare against the polar opposite of their argument, like anti-blackness versus hedge good, while our model encourages arguments with advantages and disadvantages intrinsic to the mechanism of the AFF, which makes debaters prepare strategic opportunity costs and unintended consequences in mind because of arguments like counterplans that only do part of the plan. It requires full consideration of the necessity and distinctions of stasis, which makes it more well-informed and holistically considered decisions outside of the debate. That outweighs on scope because debate is relatively small compared to other aspects of life. Second is conditional arguments. Debating both sides and reading a flawed plan encourages plural conclusions, maintaining systemic inquiry and dynamic questioning, which creates flexibility and adaptability in data interpretation that fosters a holistic picture and difficult fact-based disputes to conclude viably. Their model encourages dogmatic conclusion that aren't proven or testable, like there is no self, so none of this matters. That undermines sustained inquiry necessary to adopt reflexivity that results in decision-making independently, engaging with the technical details. Actually, I'm not going to do that stuff. Turns the AFF, our model's a floor that's a prerequisite to solving their impacts because they require change in broader society and undermining the view of the self. The only way to undermine systems of power that are opposite or that are antithetical to Buddhism is to be reflexive to the information around us. Procedural fairness is a filter. It's the only thing differentiating debate from academia or reading books. The core of the debate is competition and well-researched contestation. Their framework exposes the negative to an infinite number of affirmatives or frameworks that skews the balance of competitive equity too far in the direction of the AFF. They have to prove why debate and reading the K on the AFF without a 5-second plain text is key to all and exclusive to their model, and why that outweighs our impact. And if they don't automatically vote neg, even if you determine they won the debate because they have no reason to win the competitive game. The interpretation, topical AFFs have to defend a hypothetical federal government policy. Resolved implies enacting a policy, and USFGs in the national body. That's words and phrases in black law. Specifically, vest is done by legal institution. Anything else is in T. Group that we meet arguments. They don't. First is 1AC Cross-X said, quote, they fiat Dharma, not a policy. That was the quote from 1AC Cross-X, which means there's no stable ground because Dharma isn't in the resolution. Two is none of their solvency evidence advocates a policy, advocates an ethical stance that it says would then affect policy, but a million things implicate policy, so that can't be a standard for being topical. Fine is their third 1AC Cross-X says, quote, it's only about in this debate, no spill out claims about the outside world, which means it's impossible for them to fiat anything, to fiat stuff in the outside world. The resolved definition is counterintuitive because other words in the topic prove legal intent, but it's also implies a form of vote departure. And one resolve is to express by form of vote. Any other conclusion is inconceivable. Community requires a topic committee to write a topic for debating. Resolved from the adoption of the legislative body. The teams AFF and neg support my view from negative equivalent yes or no, which answers the question. Only substance after the colon matters. Webster's in zero. If the introductory phrase preceding the colon is brief, the clause following the colon represents the real business should denote an expectation of enacting a plan American heritage 2000 will to do something. The best definition it concedes that it's legal. I'm not going to read another card here because it says that it's just not absolute within the legislative forum, which concedes that it's legislative in the first place, which is kind of all we need. Anyways, the boy argument, their evidence does not have an intent to find, and so does ours, but their only explanation is that there's infinite, that it implicates the topic. There are infinite implications. Like if I drop my pen, it might eventually affect personhood somehow, but that's can't be a predictable stasis for ground because it doesn't offer any limit. The argument, answer the definition. Serial policy failure only we solved. That was the nuanced arguments about information reflexivity and second and third level testing in the overview. But it's also not key to our impact, which is about outside stuff and doesn't require debaters to become policymakers. The bad people argument, it's non-unique. People already have ideological commitments and will never engage politics. Think Neil Katyal, Karl Rove, and Matt Iglesias. But this argument requires them to win a massive conspiracy theory that debaters on the aggregate are worse than the rest of society, which is wholly wrong because debate is much more left than the majority of America. Only our model can solve the terminal. Reflexivity leads to positions positions that aren't dogmatic but open to change based on nuanced research and testing in the second and third level, which and different sources all result in more well-informed decision-making, which vets bad decision-making, but their model locks in the impact. Policy debaters won't change argumentative style even in their model, which non-uniques everything, but makes the way they read AFs off the deep end, which makes it much harder for K teams to read critique specific to the AF and makes it nearly impossible to go for Buddhism on the neg, independently encouraging class debates. Our stuff all outweighs procedural without a baseline procedural fairness. Debaters with bad values quit and have zero chances of changing, even if they're right about their model saving because they can't get in the game in the first place. Reflexivity also outweighs, even if they're right about the difference between including some policy research and making bad people. Our model makes people well informed on everyday and big life decisions like vaccinating their kids or getting an abortion, which are net more impactful in lives writ large and more important in terms of scope. The argument of the attachment DA, you link so much harder than us because they've also called for the ballot, but they've framed it as a refusal of these things instead of us who have acknowledged the competitive nature of the activity. They have done a bunch of competitive things in this debate, like the 1AC cross-ex refusal to clarify things as a competitive move. The fact that the 1AR is stealing prep so loudly, the 2A has to ask them to mute on Discord. It's not like I care, but the point is that all of this shit clearly proves competitive incentive. That is antithetical to realizing Buddhism in debate. It's a profoundly personal theology that demands individuals accept their place in the universe. Debate's competitive nature ensures you could give 1,000 2 hours and 2 hours on the Buddhism K, but you would still never convert anyone because the set of spiritual truths contained in 1AC inherently evade academic description, which is the thesis of their boy evidence. That was their argument about how our model can't solve the case, but it's way more true for them because they've said that you should accept a bunch of theological premises about your role in the universe and like systems of energy. The wisdom turns clash argument was answered above. You don't create wisdom in the first place, and the only way to determine if they do is by argumentative testing. The topical version of the AF also solves it. You could extend the right of life to nature with advantages about interconnection of ecosystems and the way environmental law separates from humans from nature. Or you could extend personhood to all three topic areas with advantage about how the lines between nature, AI, and people assume a false theory of contained selfhood and that personhood should be expanded infinitely. Two implications. One, it solves their offense. We don't need to win, it solves the AF, just they can continue reading the same lit base. Second is if it doesn't, it proves they can read their AF on the neg. Switch side's a better model. It avoids echo chambers and one-side monologues while forcing teams to reconsider multiple perspectives. Reading it on the neg maintains an equitable division of AF and neg ground while encouraging nuanced contextualization of the topic. And the 2AC doesn't have any reason why the ballot is key or reading it on the AF is important. It's very clearly just a critique of personhood that would be a very effective negative argument. The functional limit stuff, they don't solve it. There's a difference between ground and adequate ground. The AF has monopoly on prep and specification, which means controversy and opportunity costs are super important for the neg, but you conceded that, but they conceded you should assume the worst version of their model because of competitive incentive, which means even if there are some things to say against this AF, there aren't against the next one. The topic is about personhood, which includes a whole bunch of different processes your model doesn't solve. The thing we prepare for is mechanisms, not ethical orientations, because that's what disads and counterplans operate off of. They give the neg reactive ground the 2AC depending on what the 1NC said, which is a disastrous model that doesn't tie the AF to any core standard. It makes testing impossible. Reasonability should be rejected. It prevents a race to the fringes, and you can always be reasonably topical without a clear bright line, which only the competing interps could establish. Second is they should have to explain why their offense outweighs ours because reasonability is subjective and fosters judge intervention. It also fosters equitable definition of what the topic should look like and makes teams read topical AFs. All our offense proves competing interpretations is better. Jurisdictional voting issue teases a stock issue, thus it isn't within your jurisdiction to vote for an untopical AF, and the rest of the flow proves that they aren't reasonable in the first place. All of the arguments about how ontology overdetermines everything assume A, that their ontology could be tested in the first place, and which they've conceded you should assume it's wrong. B, that we don't have case arguments that disprove it, and C, that Buddhism is realizable in debate as a model, all of which was disproven above. Our shit turns all of theirs. They link to every piece of, well, they have like one piece of offense, but they link to it really hard because all of the things all of their critiques of teleology, of controlling debate, of the process of imagining things in the outside world are way more true for them. The AF imagines that everyone convert to Buddhism, which is distinct from like 3 policymakers passing a plan.
Okay. Let me get up a timer. All right, you good?
I am.
Okay. What's the metric that we use to compare models of debate?
Competing interpretations.
Okay, so in competing interpretations, you have offense, we have offense. How do we resolve that?
You weigh the benefits of that offense relative
so
to the
what does it
strength of
look
the
like to
internal
weigh?
links.
What does it look like to weigh delusion versus like informational awareness?
Well, that's not a benefit to your offense, so the judges don't have to weigh any of that because that argument is silly. But more importantly, the way that you weigh that is by evaluating impacts and multiplying it by roughly the risk of the internal links.
Okay, so what is
If
that?
one team's argument solves the other team's argument, that obviously affects the decision-making process because it determines whether or not
Can you
two
explain
things are
that process of
exclusive.
calculus to me? How do you evaluate that? So you said it's
Uh,
like something times something else, like magnitude.
Yeah, you
times
take the
probability?
size of an impact, you weigh it relative to the probability of the
Okay.
internal link and that impact taking place. All of
Cool.
those things are overdetermined though by things like definition, which determine the stasis
My
for
next
what predictable
question-
calculus is in the first place.
My next question is about the violation. So the AFF vests Dharma as law. What evidence defines rights and duties and says that's separate from Dharma?
We've defined a bunch of other words in the topic that necessitate a fiated government action.
What evidence says rights and duties are separate from Dharma? Are you just going to concede that Dharma is rights and duties, or what?
Well, even if, so your evidence is like Dharma could mean duty in the ontic/ontological sense. Our
Yes.
evidence, our evidence says that government policy necessitates implementation. So even if the implication of the AFF is that it establishes a sort of moral or theological duty, that doesn't mean that the plan has fiated a policy.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that.
All of our offenses.
How do we evaluate implementation? Let's say for a right of nature AFF, the AFF says, here's a legal principle, nature now has rights. Is that implementation?
What
What constitutes implementation? The plan says, so let's like the TVA is basically right of nature, right?
Okay.
Giving nature a right, is that legal?
Is it legal?
Is that
to give
an
nature a right?
implementation? Does that constitute implementation?
Not that what you just said in and of itself, no. It has to be tied to a
Then
set
how
of
is any AFF
specific-
topical?
to a set of specific
You just said
policy
that
mechanisms
giving
and
something
actors.
rights. You said that giving something rights, which is the mechanism of the topic.
I was
not
saying
topical.
the thing you wanted me to say and then you cut me off. Do you want me to answer the
Yes, yeah,
question or do
sure.
you just want to talk? Okay, cool. So the point is that the assignment of those rights and duties has to take place through a series of particular legal mechanisms that we have isolated the AFF as not using. I can say Taylor has a right to eat everything in my fridge right now. That does not assign her legal personhood.
Sending out the one in our. Okay, it should set.
We're gonna take a second to prep, sorry. Can you make the argument that all the solvent arguments?
Wait, you're unmuted.
Wait, y'all are unmuted.
That's fine. Okay.
It's case and the dis, or like it's the dissat then case, but like I'm gonna put it out instead of the dissat and case. Is everyone good? Okay, I will take that as a yes. I'll start in like 5 seconds. And let's do it. The dissat, we're not going for it, so none of their office applies in Utah is irrelevant. We're not going for this impact anymore or any of the humans outweighing stuff because this isn't our impact anymore. I'll answer the other stuff on case. They've made consequential claims, so they link to that too. I'll do that stuff on the warming case. Framing issue. We don't need to. Oh, I didn't turn my camera on. We don't need to be any of their opposites to win. On the level of cognition, people understand pain individually. When I stub my toe, it hurts me, not you. Even if it theoretically were right, no one would accept Buddhism as truth. The Twisi just blew off one of case arguments that all function has offense against their method. Don't let the 1 year recontextualize it or answer them differently. And also, obviously, proves that they're more delusional, which links back to their offense. First, they drop the movements instead of running, flexing this, articulating self is politically dangerous. They are more occupying than they pretend to be. Even if they know like all of our institutions good office, their project is so political. We are impact turning the terms of that engagement. Affirming Buddhism undermines the possibility for rights, basic living conditions, and respect for the other because it frames the entire world as a subjective terrain determined by effect and having a coherent system of ethics, being impossible. They're going to say that static subjects are violent. That's wrong. Page 95. Most recently counted as a subject is the constitution, the concept of the right subject still. Vision of the objection to really the case. Such a really bad subject organization is okay. What impression society or the exception of practice institutional proposal was the one. There's no definition of the reason to have an illusion that including the institution for condition to support theories that are with a reference to losing appropriation of foundation is by you have to overture. They suggested it was reduced to single political valence for theories of activity, theories, and so inherently offensive is just really disconfirmed. I'll extend presumption because I'm pretty sure the Twisi just didn't answer a framing issue when accessing app offense use stock agents rather than offense defense. They provide a predictable paradigm for evaluation that's equally accessible, forces the app to defend a unique and quantifiable change, preserves like uniqueness and grasp for counter methods. When applying to the methods advantages, any risk logic wrecks the negative. If the app with the method is good for them, doesn't hurt anyone, vote app. This is non-negatable, makes debate impossible. This says 3 burdens: harms, inherency, and solvency for accessing the app. Anyone means you vote neg. Harms. None of their harms are specific to dualism. They give the terminal impacts of warming and nuclear war. That obviously can be solved by certain policies. Is not resulting from us not ascribing to Buddhism. Second is inherency. The evidence proves that politics can solve, but these material impacts now engaging in political state is good. And lastly, solvency. I did that at the top. All the counterclaims that they double turn it, but anyways, the app doesn't do anything. 2AC1 was their impacts. The first group, the first 2 impacts about psychoanalysis and dualism and having to shut the legal answer. Those below with the different evidence we read of the one to see that they just didn't answer. But the warming stuff, it doesn't cause extinction. Last IBD, new peer-reviewed study journals show the IPC exaggeration by 45%. History proves that environmental resilience and future warming will be undermined by under Paris levels, and not their rock breaking strategy could offset warming and points to adaptation. Like how it's like I said before, the double turn proves that they double turn themselves by investing in causal claims and identifying a problem solution, which is exactly what they said. Said was about erratic critique. 2AC2 was the role of the ballot. They role of the ballot whoever did the better debating. Anything else is arbitrary and self-serving. It means that you inevitably vote AF even when they've skewed the conditions towards themselves. 2AC3 was the physicality debate. I'll extend the Lewis evidence here. First, framing issue. You think that they're winning is probably because you're evolutionarily predisposed to believe in things like a spirit or soul or higher power, because physicalism is intellectually counterintuitive. If you think that you move your foot, you don't think it's just your foot. Explains the ubiquity of theories of your soul across religious domination. Soul and soul analogous religions are in every single religious theology. That's a logical inference that you make with incomplete information, but it isn't really biologically defensible. It's your brain rebelling against physicalism because it's unsatisfying to you. But on the level of cognition, pain is understood individually. We're just bodies with brains and cells. That's the Lewis evidence. There's no self-necessitating. If there's no self-necessity subjecting one person to state torture because they don't experience pain as a self, or go the complete opposite way, make everyone suffer because one person does. It's the same thing as like, oh, we'll tax poor people because we should tax rich people. The same, which is just ethically bad. The quantum energy stuff. Energy operates on a physical level, which is how we understand it, which no means physicality is true. They said it's a question of ethics. No, how do we even feel ethics? 2AC gave no explanation behind this, or why you should frame it, or how you should view the sentence. Anyway, 2AC4 was the answer to Rudy. I'll extend it first. Mastery doesn't cause war or violence. If one is inevitable, whenever you try to write something, email, or try to communicate, you master your pen. Good job. 2, the theory falsely attributes an inevitable behavior with war, which exaggerates the impact of inevitable behavior. 3, it depoliticizes movements for people who want to master things like their access to clean water, the right to not have land, and take it, which just mirrors the logic of them not doing anything political, which is still worse. That's the Rudy evidence. The Twisi literally only said that it's about queer theory and moved on. There's no explanation of why it does not apply, which proves that, which means you should just reject the Twisi argument. Don't let the 1 year get anything new besides whining that it's different when there's tons of intersections between theories, and we've explained why it broadly applies. 2AC5, the Anderson evidence. I'll stand it first. Theology is politically ineffective. 1, theology in Buddhism is a bad locus for politics. It's alienating and so vacuous that every principle could just justify its opposite. No self could mean that other self is suffering just as much as yours, or that the others don't suffer because pain relies on itself. Even if one of those interprets is wrong, the fact that both of them are plausible explanations under Buddhism proves that their shit isn't accessible and it can't spill up. Second, there's no self could cause infinite harm or libertarianism, but putting religious concepts as the basis of political project are easily co-opted and redeployed, easily justified with the opposite, and making building platforms from the starting point impossible. 3, even if one side example is misreading, doesn't matter because the concepts deployed are so malleable that if you were an expert, you wouldn't know whose interpretation is correct. That's the baseline for political mobilization. It has to be palatable and coherent to the common person, deployable to context a modern audience can understand. Theirs isn't. You need a PhD to understand the difference between the shit. So you move to the level analysis in a place that's politically unworkable. But 2AC said Anderson isn't it about Buddhism? It's about anti-Black movements. First of all, that was an example when the broader theory applied. Again, this is the only thing the 2AC said, so you do not get the 1AR guest to say anything else besides it's about Black movements. They said that the AFF education is a prerequisite. We've proven that you've done nothing, and there's no further explanation of this, which means that you project it. Say 286, the Gwenham evidence. It's about reincarnation. First, this is super facing to everyone with different belief systems, takes away other people's choices and orientation. You don't know about reincarnation, but politics can prevent death in this life. Second is political engagement is the most moral system. I did that about people who hold it are ultimately most moral and attain salvation, which means that they have the best continued cycles of life. 267 was the Buddhism true science stuff. Extend the Epstein evidence. They didn't answer it. Sociology isn't the same as how states work. They assume analogous relationship between people and states. They're not just the same composition of their members, proven by popular policies that don't get implemented, gross disparities and political influence. Theorize them with more clarity than bigger blobs of individuals. If that's true, it means their theory can't answer new realism. The rational balance of power decisions move beyond individuals. Theories begin at the individual spherical and psyche step are missing links all over the place. It means that they can't turn kids, but Buddhism isn't science. They can't translate normative ideas to the self-like scientific method. CBC 20. Read the cards aside.
Awesome. Okay. 7:15. Starting now. C's prep through 12. Order is going to be case then T. Okay, let me know when everyone's ready.
Is there a dog?
Now. Sorry, my roommate's grabbing stuff right now. Charger. No pressure. Okie dokie. Everyone's good. I'll begin in a couple seconds. The activist act the legal dharma, only embracing a boost ethic can lead to enlightenment. The impact is stuck. We are winning an ontological claim that delusion synonymous with violence. Interconnectedness means war and harm to the environment is impossible. They've dropped quantum physics proves reincarnation's true. Infinite current makes it triodize. Infinite S-risk means any risk the legal dharma solves versus ethical orientation. Dharma views the self and nature as one, which means the process of war of the harm of the environment is impossible. Second is dharma's law. Legal dharma solves ontology because one ABC boy says that dharma unifies all cosmic, which enables self-realization free from legal barriers. Specifically, that answers their law good arguments, answers their movement argument. For one, we are laws. Secondly, movements. Secondly, enlightenment's key to movements. Otherwise, movements are just delusional. We provide historical examples of Hitler with the Jews, Bush with the war in Iraq, kind of proving how if we operate in politics without first in reflecting on ourselves and reflecting our relationship to greed and delusion, that leads to violence. Secondly, the notion of a static subject. This is connected to a critique of person, and we provide specific examples of kind of this idea of viewing yourself as separate kills things like empathy, greed. It leads to greed, violence, where you justify hurting others because you view them as separate from yourself. Only reframing a relationship is key to solve that. On the presumption stuff, firstly, we present a harm in the 1AC impacts. We isolate an advantage to why legal dharma is a good idea. Secondly, it is inherent. There's an ongoing kind of structure. We said only moving towards enlightenment through legal dharma can solve. Thirdly, we are solving. They should have answered our legal dharma warrants, but they refuse to read actual solves to our political method, meaning we are solved. There's no bell on presumption. No questionable stuff on T here. Also on the legal stuff, delusion is dharma is T. Dharma is dharma is legal methods. It's key to the reframe our relationship to law. Answer to the climate stuff. This climate models evidence is bad. For one, it's from a business. Secondly, we don't have to win that climate change is necessarily existential to win. The environmental destruction is the root cause of things like war, ecological destruction, biodiversity loss, and those all go accidental in the short term. And that was dropped. Answer to the rule about arguments. Obviously, better debating is super arbitrary. It's a question of ethics. How we determine the plan and the method of the 1AC is a good idea based on the ethics of the plan. Thus, subjectivities come first. The only good desire is enlightenment. If we win enlightenment, it's a good idea. You vote for us. Answer to their brain stuff. The brain focus is bad. They drop the training that's here saying specifically the brain and kind of neuroplasticity does not examine the sixth sense of the mind, kind of the stuff that neuroscience cannot solve for. Only kind of that through Buddhism can address things like kind of how we view violence, how we view our feelings, and only that is key. And they've also dropped the quantum physics and Einsteinian Newtonian physics proves that life exists after death. We isolate specific examples of energy exists outside this, all kind of energies transfer through conservation of energy. They've dropped these words. Don't let them answer their mastery balance stuff. For one, this card is based on a completely different political theory and it does not apply. They drop our delusion argument that delusion is a prerequisite. If we don't grapple with delusion, we're inevitably going to replicate the kind of forms of violence. And Anderson, that's why the delusion offense above. And also, it's not in the comics. This card's really bad on that question. And on the reincarnation stuff, they drop quantum physics and Buddhism is true. Meditation, they drop meditation, scientifically proven. They resolve suffering. They drop energy excesses and they drop science. Necessarily sucks. Only sixth sense of the mind can solve on T. They've conceded that there's no objective resolution that matters because even if they win, that there's a vision of the resolution that requires government processes. And top level, we meet. They drop plan X in a vacuum. And it's the only metric for evaluating topicality. Their definitions just define what the plan would do. And advantages don't have to be topical. Anything else mixes burden. And B, the 2NC was incoherent on the violation. They said we need a 6-second plan text. We have all of their offense in the context of anti-topical asks, not us. They said we feel Dharma, not a policy. They dropped that Dharma is literally a policy. Boy says that Dharma connects ethics was law, which means it means to be ethical legal. The app is different from the pen example because it directly challenges law. The whole result of the thing was that Dharma law is law applies, implies that shit happens. Read the one you see boy evidence after that. Boy is the intent to define is the only evidence in the realm that contextualizes is Dharma, the rights and duty. Boy says the cosmic principle of interconnectedness that implicates that rights and duties are inseparable. The AFF, ethical legal Dharma as law, which imposes duties and rights. That means that the way the duties and rights goes down, it controls how it happens. Extend our counter-termination should result in invest includes ethics in the topic needs. Debate is about ethics. They dropped ethics debates are better because it's much more predictable. They also dropped like checks and functional limits, said the only grounds concessionary, but that doesn't link. There was no answers to the ethical positioning. They said their model of debate creates debaters who use whatever ethics convenient to suit their needs, which turns any benefit from the activity. Info awareness doesn't matter if we start acting with evil. Their model is serial policy failure. Sidelining ethics, what causes delusion, that causes the mistreatment of the environment in the endless war. And answer their attachment to said, yes, competitiveness exists and we compete. The dissent was a dissent excluding debate from its benefits. We said that competition doesn't over-determine anything. The negative is attached to debate as a game. Debate cannot be separated from everything else. Their competitive incentives are not productive nor neutral, but reproduce delusion that entrenches DACA, which entrenches suffering and also self-hate for debaters by evacuating all means from competition. Answer. Extender Clash Guion said this was dropped, that all the benefits to the model, better information processing, mechanism, education disputes over virtual evidence are non-unique and inevitable. Insular debates do not create wisdom. The negative assumes that more iteration accesses benefits from debate, but iteration without meaning has no value. Solutions will not come from more data, research, or critical thinking. The only benefit from the activity is internal transformation, which allows us to use that answer to their TVA. The TVA is legit just the app. We are a right of nature app. The whole res does not access our specific ethical debates because those debates are over ethics. Centering ethics is uniquely key. We isolate those. The John Evans, how kind of if education is divorced from meaning that reproduces things like delusion. The idea that politics is a neutral ground, not separate. In answer to do it on the negative, it doesn't solve legal dharma, which is pro-person, and every app changes person. It's not a K of person, but a K of how we relate to person, and only through dharma can we solve that through an implementation of rights through a plan text. Answer the truth testing. Truth testing is stupid. We debated on case, which means we get it. Reasonability, competing interpretations. Anything else is arbitrary. Top level, we read a plan text. They define it in context of a K app. We are not a K app. We read a plan text. We implement legal dharma. They have no definition of rights. We're the only ones complying a comparative definition of rights. We define rights as legal dharma. It's a legal revolution. We defend the plan text and its implementations.
Okay, we have 3:44, it looks like. Give me a sec, sorry.
Okay, T and then case. Okay, anyone not ready? Right, I'm gonna start in like 5 seconds unless someone yells at me. Okay. Vote negative for a model debate that encourages predictable, well-researched contestation and argument development. This is a critique of the way they've chosen to use predictability in this debate. Unpredictability is a tactical choice. We've impact turned that choice by saying it dilutes debate's academic potential. You are not voting on whether or not it is morally required to uphold the resolution. You are voting on whether or not it's valuable for academics to debate each other predictably or unpredictably, which should frame all their offense. Only our model of debate solves competitive incentives to promote well-informed decision-making. Predictability forces second and third level argument testing with the consideration of opportunity costs and unintended consequences, as well as conditional advocacy that makes people reflexive to information they receive compared to their model of debates over Buddhism versus Hedgegood, which locks in ideological dogmatism because it lacks depth, testability, and holistic fact-finding skill. They've conceded a uniqueness argument from the 2NC overview that should frame the impact calc. Information validity is at risk across domains now, and it's trier-diet reflective thinkers to resist misinformation on things like vaccinating your children and other public information threats to climate change and the next Iraq war. The alternative is centralized destructive populism, which outweighs on scope and time frame because debate is a relatively small community, and only our model imbues debates with the skills to make accurate decisions about how to challenge the problems in their daily lives and in politics, which turns the AFF. The only way to undermine broader systems is to be reflexive to the information around us. A couple frames for the entire flow. Our offense is intrinsic to the way their model operates in practice and a stable interp to resolve it. All their offense has to have a reason why the ballot debate, reading it on the AFF, and not defending a mechanism is key. That was explicit judge framing in the block, and they brush it off and requires a threshold for you to scour the flow to compare impacts. If any of these things aren't explicitly explained as crucial to their offense in the 2AR, then you should vote negative. Second is that they've conceded competitive incentive is inevitable. The 1AR says the line, the competitive incentive, it's antithetical to Buddhism, which means it sabotages their shit, but also that they've double turned it, because if that's true, then all of the competitive things they have done in this debate prove they're not consistent with their own ethic. Three is that if any of the defense is right, they are more delusional, which is an argument that 2NC yelled like 15 times that the 1AR just dropped. They say no objective resolution. The we meet debate and all the interpretations are going to prove that it is, but our entire argument is that it doesn't matter if it's objective because there's community consensus. There's a topic paper everyone is given with a set of legal mechanisms and definitions in it that everyone assumes are the case, even if in like an ontic sense it's not it's not objectively true. The we meet arguments, they don't. They drop too much stuff in the block for you to vote on this. We don't need to win. They violate definitional stuff beyond reading a plan, because the 2NC told you that if you think they meet our definition, you should evaluate this as a K of unpredictability. We have a few link arguments. First is fiat. The plan doesn't endorse a legal mechanism through the state. We read definitions that the words in the res mandate that, which ensures it's most predictable. 2AC argument was only that their ethical stance implicates politics, and the language in the 1AR was that the Dharma, quote, challenge laws, which is not the same thing as using a legal mechanism to pass a law. Second is the mindset stuff. Assuming a massive theological shift makes negation impossible because DA links and counterplan mechanisms are contingent on the world as is, and no literature ever assumes the entire world converts to religion. The third is the stuff from the 1AC. 1AC cross-check said they fiat Dharma, not a policy, which means there's no stable ground because Dharma isn't in the res. Second is none of their solvency evidence advocates a policy, advocates an ethical stance that it says would then affect policy, which is distinct. Last is 1AC cross-check says it's, quote, only about in this debate, no spill out claims about the outside world, which are all the quotes that our characterization of has been conceded. If you aren't sure what they said or might be persuaded when the 2AR stands up and announces they meant something else, that just proves their model forces the negative reactionary positions to make adequate preparation impossible, because debating an AF without a particular mechanism is like getting in a fist fight with a fucking puddle. The definition stuff, US is the legislative, executive, and judicial, which means the AF has to endorse one of those things. Second is resolved that with a colon implies a formal vote. It's a term of art used in legislative forms. That's the 2NC Parcher evidence in the card after that about the colon. Three is should denote the expectation of enacting a plan. It's read contextually and when accompanied by other legal terms of art like resolved and vest, it can only mean one thing. Five is their definition of vest, which says it isn't absolute but has to take place within a formal legislative form, which the 2NC explicitly answered. The Dharma is policy stuff. It's answered above. The boy evidence just says that duty can be Dharma in a theological sense, but not that it's policy and that it spills up to affect policy. But if that's the standard, millions of things could possibly spill up to affect policy, which means it's not a good frame. Functional limits, they dropped, you should assume the worst version of everything where there aren't functional limits, which should also frame reasonability because the competitive incentive arguments ensure there's always a incentive to raise to the bottom. But mechanisms are key, and you force concessionary ground whereby the functional limit is like Afro-pessimism and cap good. Those are bad debates that are worse for realizing your politics because it makes it impossible for us to talk about the nuance of Buddhism and how we could make it and how it could be enabled. The implication of all of this stuff is that debaters use ethics to do bad stuff in the outside world. They conceded it's non-unique. People already have ideological commitments like Neil Katyal and Matt Iglesias in the argument, which means the only question is how we refine those things to use them in the outside world. But their model locks it in worse because policy debaters don't change their argumentative style. They just get more dogmatic, which straight turns this and means it's not an offense for them. They say iteration without competition bad stuff was answered above. Iteration without testing is meaningless was also answered. None of the rest of it matters. Ethics outweigh stuff begs the question of what ethics matter in the first place. That's something we have impact turned. It also begs the question of whether or not we could test their stuff. Case. Reincarnation wasn't dropped, even if we didn't answer why it's true. They didn't answer offense on why it's bad. One is super facing to people with different belief system choices and orientation. Difference alone disproves the broad theory of dualism in Buddhism, but for sure institutional engagement prevents death. Second is politics is the most moral system, so people who upload it have the best continued life cycles and attain salvation in their spiritual lives, which means framework turns the case. Physicalism is true. Even if we don't beat their offense on the level of cognition, people experience pain physically and individually, which is the only thing that matters because we don't have to beat their theory. If I get a paper cut, I hurt, not you, which turns the case because their method is read as absolute bullshit by people who need to adopt it. Lewis evidence says we're all just bodies and cells, nothing more. Overwhelming consensus with hard data like experiments and peer-reviewed studies and things like personal testimonials prove their authors prove their authors aren't right. Finally, they've conceded it can't be mobilized because all of the principles are so vacuous that it's impossible to produce a political platform off of them. Nobody relates to them, and that's the baseline for politics. It makes it impossible to do things like right reclamation, which requires an objective view of the self.
Okay. We have 312. Started. Okay. It's case T. Is Christiana here? Yes. Go. We have won this debate because we have a large amount of offense and they have literally no defense to any of our offense. They did not say do it on the neg, did not say our stuff, presume our stuff, all picks of truth testing, and did not say the TVA. They also dropped, we are the TVA. We have a large amount of defense to their stuff. None of their education is unique, which is a conceded argument from the Zhejiang stuff and any of our offense, and all of it actresses and turns it. This is a massive mess up strategically from the Tunar because they've just overemphasized their offense. Most of the case is irrelevant because all of the questions of any risk of offense overdetermines it, and all of this is irrelevant if we win the violation. Now I'll explain what the AFF is and then answer why that implicates all of the law stuff. We are the law. We fiat legal dharma, creating a legal revolution, transforming a relationship with ourselves. The 1AC boy evidence, here's what it says. It says ethics is currently separate from laws, but there's valuable and ethical principles which are connected to laws. That's what it means to be ethical legal. Specifically, dharma is an ethical legal principle about rights and duties because dharma is what you are due to, and when it's due to you, they dropped the 1AR line that says rights and duties are interconnected, and that dharma as law imposes that. That was at the top of every overview on the case page, which is explaining what it is. Christiana, I added this because you added this to the AFF overviews because you said that you weren't sure what dharma as law was. It was consistent the whole debate because dharma is the unification of that. That is an explanation that they have not grappled with. The negative has not said dharma is not any of those things. They've just parroted us about cross-ex and misinterpreted us to say that we are these things, which is just not what the AFF is. All these law shit is now irrelevant because the AFF is that legal stuff. Will answer some defense. No, answer some defense. The engagement action stuff is incoherent when compared against our offense. The law and peg evidence says action without enlightenment results in the delusion entrenched to structural dukkha. The impact of that was war and environmental collapse, which is there's no impact defense to. The Hitler example proves that a structural level that action in and of itself is not good. If our emotions and motivations and ethics are shitty, which is there's no impact defense to, which will implicate our offense on topicality. We do not preclude action. It says enlightenment must come first because ethics inform that action. Otherwise, we operate by a lens which replicates our delusion. All their evidence also doesn't pursue concession of scientific historical warrants for ontology. Their warrants for ontology, the quantum dual wave particle stuff says that uncertainty is inevitable, and they drop that scientific object study is interconnected to everything. We're not going for the incarnation stuff because it's irrelevant, but all of our legal stuff we access because we are legal. The impact of that is mostly conceived. Tell me why dharma is not law. How do they drop plain text in a vacuum again, which means that it is literally impossible to vote negative on the violation. They conceded that the only metric for evaluating topicality is plain text in a vacuum. Well, I know you're going to vote on this because the only definitions just define what the plan would do. Advantages do not have to be topical. Anything else mixes burdens. That means that the only prior of a violation they have is some memeing argument about cross-ex or about why you should assume the worst version of our stuff. That's obviously not relevant to topicality because the plan determines what we fiat, which answers all of their stuff and all of their examples. The 200C was incoherent. They said we needed 6-second plan text. All of their offense is not intrinsic to us. All the ranting I said about what the boy evidence is and about how rights and duties are inseparable means that our stuff is T. It connects ethics with laws, which is what it means to be ethical legal, which means we resolve this. Now, the counter-interpretation should resolve, vest, etc. all include ethics in the debate. If they win, that those stuff requires some legal stuff, that means that we are that because we define what the plan is, which is the plan text in a vacuum argument, but they dropped ethics debates are better because it's more portable and more predictable. The more predictable. Addison, I know your paradigm says that you love ethics debates. It's important because it means that debaters use whatever ethics are convenient to suit their needs. Yes, information awareness is important, but our Zhejiang evidence is very, 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 very specific to their offense and says that all of that is inevitable and insular, and just insularly debating about that without connecting that to ethics means we never use that for the good model of debate. Their only answer was new in the Tunar about appeal Catiel. The truancy did not say that, which means you should strike it from your flow. But the truant argument is just completely irrelevant. Their model is serial policy failures because debaters use whatever ethic necessary to suit their need, which is this convenient, which is the same logic which we said, allows environmental consumption of the environment because you're allowed to sideline it because it's not included within your ethics, which makes them worse debaters. The attachment is said not a double turn. Competitiveness exists and we compete. This ad was just set to excluding debate from its benefits. Competition does not over-determine everything. Yes, we're invested in competition, but they are over-invested in it and attached to it, which is a delusive relationship. They're entrenched in wins and losses and suffering. Our whole thing is that you cannot separate debate from its external meaning and value, which is why all of our net benefit of wisdom and better ethics outweighs the Zhang stuff. I already said the non-uniqueness, inevitable stuff, which was not answered. They said that those insular debates are inevitable, but they conceded that it turns because the only benefit of the activity is internal transformation, which allows us to use that. Remember there are specific examples of like the in here out there argument is irrelevant. It's not just in here. We said that in here is the relationship in debate is the relationship to everything else. Now a couple of technical things that they dropped some extra topicality arguments that impact terms don't have to be topical. Dedubbing and disad doesn't influence the plan, and interconnectedness is inevitable, which enters their mind shift violation because every AF has to do that. Every AF has to do that. It's the same as a Republican changing their mind about pro-business versus the environment. The competing interpretations frame, even if you evaluate the debate under competing interpretations, are offense outweighs, but they've conceded substance cutout means that enlightenment is the only net benefit to debate. Let's see. The neg being reactionary doesn't matter. All of our they conceded all of our stuff about the functional limit is not anti-blackness, it is core rad's ground. The plan preserves all that mechanism of education because it uses the US. Obviously, we meet. Dharma is law. We explain that. Crossix is bullshit and they're just characterizing us.
Good debate, y'all.
Good debate.
Debate.
Good debate, everyone.
We're all in, I'm pretty sure. I was the last one. Okay, think everyone's here. Okay. I guess I can announce it because I'm the last one in and I don't know if y'all can even see the result. But anyway, congratulations on making it to the, I believe, Octa finals of the UMW debate tournament. The decision is a 2-1 for the affirmative from Tufts, Massachusetts.
I can go first. I sat barely. I thought that this was a good, very close debate. The 2NR and 2AR both make the choice to set up kind of yes/no distinctions. The AFF sets it up based on plan text in a vacuum, and then NEG sets it up on the basis of acceptance. The reason why the NEG ended up getting my ballot first starts out at the notion of the coverage decisions made by both the 2NR and 2AR, which made my life extraordinarily difficult. I felt that both, while making those yes/no decisions, spent most of their time talking about impacts that don't change the basis of those yes/no decisions, which was problematic for me and made it much harder to assess. For example, I am not sure how I would look at certain notions like plan text in a vacuum and other stuff in terms of assessing this at the conclusion of both speeches. The basis that I had at the end of the round to vote neg rather than AFF is on the offshoot of the T-flow, not the T-flow itself. I don't think that there's a good answer to the concept of the K of unpredictability. I think there's only answers to T really on that flow in the 2AR, and I think that you need to do a little bit more work on that possibility. One of the things that 2NR did spend a bunch of time on was that explanation that, look, even if there's a question on the T level, you can default to the K of unpredictability in terms of it does provide a basis for a robust debate. I don't think that that's really answered in a way that allows me to kind of vote for that. So I can totally easily see how this got to be a AFF ballot, because I do think that you all win the T discussion. I don't think you deal with that default option on my ballot. And so that's kind of what causes me to vote neg.
I can go, or you can go. I really don't care.
I'm pretty quick, so I'll just go real quick. I just want to say I thought it was a really good debate. I was really close to deciding with Will, but in the end, I voted AFF because I just didn't think that plain text in a vacuum was answered, and that's the case. Most of the definition work kind of went away for me because it was now just maybe the AFF functions a little differently than was initially explained in cross-ex. I sat for a long time because I thought about voting on the argument as voting on the K of unpredictability argument on the T-flow, but I just couldn't end up voting for it because I'm not sure that I'm convinced when the AFF is winning plain text in a vacuum that it causes taking a different ethical approach to necessarily become unpredictable. I couldn't quite get past that. I thought for a long time still about voting neg on T even without answering plain text in a vacuum, because I am not with the AFF on the boy evidence at all. I think that the evidence is using the term law, not in a literal legal sense, but more in a rather natural law sense. Neg didn't really point this out, so I wasn't going to give that to the negative. But I just do not agree with that reading of the evidence. Given this, I don't really understand what Dharma looks like in the US legal system outside of literally just the plain text in a vacuum and using a Buddhist ethical frame. But really, in short, I'm generally in a disagreement with the way that the affirmative has structured and answered multiple of the T arguments, but there wasn't an RFD that I could give that was able to explain not voting AFF on plain text in a vacuum. I have some other thoughts just on philosophical, like metaphysical stuff, but I just put that in team comments to save time.
I agree with a lot of what has been said by both judges because I sat for a little while too. And I honestly felt after the 2NR, like I felt that the bar was high to vote AFF after the 2NR. I felt like the 2NR was pretty good. But then once the 2AR, like you made some decisions and the 2AR made some decisions. And I thought that you'd made the right decision, but I'm not sure that ended up happening. So I think that I ended up voting AF because, I mean, the block was hot, like, and I said this in the comments, but I feel like some of the decisions you make in the 2NR makes it harder. So I think you need to more clearly articulate what it means for you to win the case arguments. And if you're going to go for them, give them some extra time, because I think that helps get at some of the issues or some of the offense that they're getting at, but you're kind of like, presumption is kind of like as a little bit of an afterthought. And I think it needs to be more of the debate. Like, I think instead of it being, because then they get to do this plain text in a vacuum stuff, which you can just interrogate more. And once you've interrogated that enough on the case, then it means it doesn't, like, plain text in a vacuum and the AF, the way it's explained, are inconsistent. That then the way that it would be interpreted, like, that's not a good standard. And you don't necessarily have to like defend plain text in a vacuum. I suppose you could defend something different on the neg, but I think that ultimately in this context, you have to go for switch side. And I think the way that you should reframe the subjectivity debate is that switch side debate doesn't negatively affect subject formation. Because sometimes I think the choices that teams make are just that it doesn't affect subject formation. And they're like, really? Like, are we really spending all our time here to like not be better people? Are we not better people? And so that's not super compelling. But I think that this framing could be, which is switch side debate doesn't negatively affect subject formation. It makes it better. And then it build on that argument to say that we may read different frames in debates, but we still gain the knowledge and, I dare say, wisdom from considering different perspectives, including and specifically by switching sides. So this would mean you could also lean more into some of the research route, why like this other research is important, that the reason we need the specifics of the legal is because we're having this debate right here about whether or not this is a legal change or not, like the app says it is. And I think ultimately I agree with Addison about like, if you push back on this boy evidence and you're like, that's not how this works, you're definitely in a better position. Even on the predictability stuff, like I think that it gives you a more uniqueness for that. So I do think, like I said about switch sides, and so I think you should go for switch side because it takes out their ethics offense. I think the ethics stuff is a place where you really need to sort of just like get at it more. And if you reframe the stuff like I mentioned above, I think that it gets to that offense, because we can have ethics debates on the neg. But the two, like on the neg, like we can do the things I talked about, but the 2NR strategy reinforces the argument that we just sort of adjust ethics as we see fit based on a resolution that is not necessarily objective, and based on a resolution that I don't think you have won, that this other type of education from this other side is necessary. And I think you can with those things, you just don't go for those things in this debate. So I think going for unpredictability with your definitions is less helpful. When they're claiming legal action stuff, I think you need to take them up on this more. So I think if you go for the presumption ballot, and it's we can win on presumption alone based on these 5 case arguments, I'm going to spend like a minute or like minute 20 max here, and then the rest of it on the T debate, and be like, this filters the rest of the offense. Any reason they say their ethics are good, like we have called into question whether or not their ethics are sufficient to result in the actions they've claimed, which should take out the offense. And so then it becomes more of a question, not a question of predictability anymore. It's a question of solvency mechanism, right? And so I think that some sort of circumvention argument would be helpful. Like, how do we enforce the application of ethico-legal dharma? This will allow you the defense you need to sort of push back against the ethics arguments. So, but good job to everybody.
Yeah. Kala, is it okay if I ask like one quick question and then we go to the next round? Okay. So this is technically mostly for Baez and Wagner, even though you voted for us. So it's like the reading of the boy evidence, like, so it's sort of like, did our explanation make sense? And I sort of like think that part of the card, which is like, so the top part of the card is what you said it was, which is like natural law, but there's like a part in the card which is like our legal system is implicated by that, and ethical legalism means that we would harmonize that natural law with the legal system. And I don't know if I made that clear enough, or like what explanation should I use? Because the card kind of says like the present legal system is disconnected, disintegrated, and dissected, and ancient legal concepts are harmonized. And then it says that the law should unify those things. So we were going to say, so what I was trying to say is like the natural law would be like, the plan would make those two the same basically, and like connect those two. And that's what I was trying to articulate. Or like, what's like the best phrasing of this?
What you
like,
just said. I think the way you just said it right now is better than the way that you explained it in this debate, and better than the debate last night by like a long shot. And so I do think that helps, because that helps us to understand like how one would be guided by, and maybe you can even make the argument that like the legal system is currently guided by certain ethics. We will just disagree with the current way that we prioritize or apply those ethics as it suits our needs, which is kind of how it happens in debate as well, right? Sometimes we say that life matters and abortion is bad, or sometimes we don't. And so there's like a lot of contestation about ethics within the law. So this discussion is not sort of out of the realm of legal, like, I think so. Just explaining it that way, I think it's helpful. But yeah, Addison, if you want to add.
I'm gonna jump in one
Yeah.
sec before Addison goes, just to say, that was the first time you explained it as a corrective, rather than saying Dharma is already the law, which is one of the differentials that makes it hard to assess it that way when comparing the top and bottom of that evidence. That's all I just wanted to add before Addison goes.
Yeah, I really don't have very much, if anything, to add on what they said. Looking at the bottom of the card, I can see what we're kind of talking about, but I guess for the most part, the way that I'd understood it throughout the whole debate was just like Dharma, there's the concept itself being a natural law, and I wasn't quite sure how that was being infused by the AFF into like actual policy throughout the way that the plan was advocating. Some of what you've said makes more sense for me to be able to understand that now, and definitely some of what Cristiano said makes sense. But that was definitely just something that I did not understand from the debate or from just reading the card.
Okay, thank you so much. Good debate, Cal. Always fun. Okay, see you guys.
Debate, y'all. Thank y'all.
Oh, shit, the echo. Okay, is this still echoing? Are we okay? All right, really quick. I'm not gonna post around or anything. I just want to speed run questions. This is our first time. I've never gone for framework before. So I had a question about the thing that you said, Christiana. How do you think is the best way to articulate when you're talking about using case stuff to answer a plan text in a vacuum? The presumption part makes sense to me. What's the connection between using the case stuff and answering the vacuum we meet argument?
I think that in conjunction with you just being like, why is plan in a vacuum consistent with the ethic of the 1AC? Like, why is it that you can just defend plan in a vacuum? Because plan in a vacuum, and now that I'm thinking about it out loud, even like seems kind of devoid of Dharma, because it would divorce any ethics which are ultimately explained in the rest of the 1AC. So if we just look at the text, we don't automatically change that frame or whatever. So I think you need to push back on like plan text in a vacuum. And then I think something about more like vagueness. So like the combination of the presumption argument plus the lack of clarity around enforcement in the process. And so, I mean, I think that you have like all the right pieces too. So yeah, that's my thought.
Okay, that makes sense. Sorry.
I just had one thing I wanted to add to that as well. I think that another thing to point out is like, where specifically do we draw the line on what all is the plain text in a vacuum? Because if we're also including the phrase of a Buddhist imperative, that what the hell does that mean in the context of anything that anyone has defined in the debate? Michigan MM pulled some stuff with this last year as well, with the like in accordance with socialism being thrown into their plain text. Like, I have no idea what that means in the context of the debate. And so I don't think that plain text in a vacuum is something that they should be able to access, because the rest of the 1AC has to explain what that modifier means. And if that modifier means something not topical, then I'm not going to vote for the AFF. But yeah.
Retweet 100%. I guess that's what I was thinking. I was like, I think you need to be more going for like a topicality argument at this point. Okay, what is legal Dharma? Like, that's not a term of legal, like that's not a legal term. It would not be recognized. So that the adjustments aren't necessary, even in plain text, like a plan flaw, something along those lines, as kind of a backup or evidence that they have a very vague, unclear text. So they should not get the plan in a vacuum stuff.
Okay, that makes sense. Did you
I
have a
just
thought?
want to point out, is this your first time going for framework? the other thing that can bring that home is just very simple practical concepts like Mitch McConnell is not looking back at legislative history and seeing legal dharma anywhere, right? Like there are just certain examples that can make it kind of more poignant and make it easier for judges to pull the trigger as well.
Sorry, I'm trying to take notes, but I'm typing slow. Okay, that totally makes sense. I wanted to ask about the ethics stuff too. I don't think I communicated this well in the 2NR, but my sort of like vision was that the info reflexivity stuff impact turns ethics debates because it shows the importance of having like specific mechanism legal debates, and other stuff devolves into like hedge and Afro-pessimism against philosophy stuff, which is dogmatic and worse for ethics. Is there a better way to say that seems more like offense against their thing?
I mean, for me, I would say no. I thought that was pretty persuasive, and it was one of the things I paused the most on. I just wasn't sure exactly how you were able to access the offense if I thought that plain text in a vacuum meant that the AFF was topical in the sense you were defining, because then I think that your model debate, the only one that exists, their AFF exists within your model, so we're not gonna get all that outside, or like it's just solved the offense sufficiently for me. But I thought that all the explanation of that was fine. It was convincing. I thought it was good.
Yeah, I would just add that I think it's like pairing the predictability stuff with the legal education stuff, and then using the planned text and vacuum debate sort of as an example of that, right? Like the reason we need specific legal debates is because we don't understand how, like the AFF is an example of how much we don't get it. Like you can't just throw you can't just throw ethical legal dharma into a text and think that the Supreme Court will understand what that means. So I think that would be, I think that's something that would be helpful. Yeah, because I'm with you on like legal debate's good. I think that predictable, what I mean is like predictability for the sake of predictability doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but predictability because of the importance of preserving that education, legal education, is good. So I think framing those two things together is a better way, and just like spending a little bit more time on the legal debate's good stuff. But I think that the thing that is also has me hung up is like, it means that things just devolve to Afro-pessimism and like something else. I think your examples are just like kind of meh there. I'm just kind of like, does it? I don't know about that. Like instead, it means like we do not know how to be better advocates. How do we protest certain laws? How do we demand things of legal systems if we do not have the grammar to talk about those things? It's not necessarily that we'll only read anti-Blackness. It's that, it means that we lose the engagement in like, it shapes our social movement building capacities, basically.
And you have an easy one-liner that's just not anywhere in this debate. Ethics don't exist in a vacuum. Even if a plain text does, they're always grounded. And I don't know why that's not part of the speech at some point in time to kind of bring that through. It's like, yes, we can have ethics debates, but they have to come from somewhere or be grounded in something, because there's such a big differential in terms of how those can occur.
Yeah, that's smart. That makes sense. Okay, and then last question was just like general strat stuff. I wasn't really sure what to do in the block because I was like having trouble discerning what the AFF was going to defend and stuff. And like I knew inevitably the rabbit was going to come out of the hat in the 1AR, and like didn't really know what to do. Do you think we should have just gone for testing good? Like should the 2NC have just been like, we need to destroy the environment and abuse animals because it's fun? I mean, not that literally, but like, you know what I mean? Like, should we just go
not that terminal impact? Disease and like medical innovation, I think, is a reasonable way to take it. I voted against them last night on fetal personhood because they were doing sort of like a middle ground, like, yes, we affect laws. And so the link was like clear enough. And in this round, they defended that legal change happened even more. So I think that a disad like makes sense, and you let them pull the rabbit out of the hat in that direction when you go for T. But I think that there are also moments that you can make earlier, like some cross-ex moment or something where you can explain, like they're like, depends on the disad. What do you mean it depends on the disad? Like, are you going to defend a link or not? Like, I'm asking, are you going to say no link, we don't use the law? Like, and so I feel like your questioning was trying to get at that, but maybe just like get to be more pointed rather than more general.
Okay, yeah. All right, I don't have any other questions. Thank you all so much.
Congrats, y'all. Good
debate,
job.
both of you.
Cal FT is off to bed.
Good night.
Bye,
Good
everyone.
night.